Hello friends and welcome to my guide on how to play hard support. We're going to be breaking down the different phases of the game so that you know exactly what to do in order to be an exceptional support player. Now if you are a soft support player, I still recommend you watch this video, and if you're a 5 support player, go watch the 4 support video because it's important to know what the other supports are going to do, whether you're trying to outplay the enemy 4 support in your lane or work with the 4 support on your team. By understanding what everyone's trying to do, you can understand what you need to do. Now, if you're a core player, I still recommend you watch this because I could use the viewers, because you have to work with supports when you play core, and also you have to play support when you're earning role queue tokens, so it's good for you to know a basic idea of what's going on. Once you press accept and load into the game, you should start thinking about your game plan, because once you're actually playing and pressing all those buttons, there's a lot going on, it's easy to forget what you need to do. So come up with a game plan ahead of time that'll keep you on track as you play. Start by picking your hero in pubs, supports, first phase. It's the most common. It's fine. Pick whoever you want. I don't care. It's a video game. Do what you enjoy. If you want to know who I think is better, then find whatever recent tier list I made and you can go with one of those. Predict your lane matchup based on your pick and the carry, and then try to predict who you think the enemy off lane and 4 support will be, and figure out how you think that lane should go. I recommend you ask yourself if your lane is weak or strong, you and your carry, and if the enemy off lane is weak or strong. That'll help you understand whether you want to be defensive or aggressive in the lane or somewhere in between. Try to predict the other lanes as well so you know if you need to help them in the early game, and from there try to imagine your win conditions. What are the things you need to do in order to win? Sometimes that is just a carry who needs to get a certain amount of farm and they're the best late game carry, so we win once they get 6 slotted. Other times you're behind, you need to have a bit more urgency in order to win. Another question you want to ask yourself at this time is whether you plan to block any camps or unblock any camps. If you're not sure, you can go back to what I had you ask earlier about whether you're a weak lane versus a strong lane or whatever matchup, and follow this rough flow chart. The idea here is that if you are weak, you don't really want to fight the enemy. And thankfully, we're the safe lane, so the creeps naturally meet in front of our tower, and that's a relatively good spot. The enemy, whether they are weak or strong, will be trying to pull the lane back towards their tower through various tricks, and pulling can be one of those. So how bad of a situation is that for us? And if they do get a pull off, how bad is that? Can we go contest it? Now, if we are weak versus strong, for example, you may want to get 2 sentries and plan to buy more with that starting bounty gold and passive gold, because I do not want them to pull. I can't body block it because the enemy 4 support is stronger than me and they'll just beat me up and I'll have a really bad trade. So I want to block it and stay by my tower to be safe. That way they can't pull to get the equilibrium back. And in case the lane does shove out, I want to be ready to unblock my small camp. Maybe even do it preemptively, not wait to see it blocked at 1 minute. I actually just put it before that and check the box to make sure I guarantee get a spawn at 1 minute. That way, if the lane does push out, really dangerous for us, that's okay. I can pull right away and get equilibrium to come back. If you're weak versus weak or strong versus weak, you have a few more options because we're not as worried about dying, and so you can buy a sentry or you can choose not to. It kind of depends on the matchups. But the strong versus strong lane, I recommend you prioritize fighting items because those matchups tend to be volatile. Whoever takes the lead just kind of snowballs from there. And if you are stepping away to go do pulls, that means you're leaving your carry alone, and if the enemy 2 heroes are strong, they might just kill your carry, or they might choose to kill you as you wander into the jungle. So in strong versus strong lanes, you tend to want to prioritize staying together, sticking in the lane, and so actually thinking too much on doing pulls can be a bait, and spending money on sentries, which won't help you stay alive at all unless they're invis heroes, then that's fine. It would be better to buy blood grenades, early stats, things like that, so that when a fight does break out in the lane, we have as much of an advantage as possible to try to win that fight. Once you load in, the game has begun. Many people are just dawdling about in the fountain, drives me crazy. Of course, it'll happen sometimes, but it's best to leave the fountain ASAP because there are things to do before the bounty rune spawn. So if you decided to block any camps, it is usually good to just rush out there and block. If you are fast and others are slow, you will get there undetected. They won't know you blocked their camp, and many people in pubs do not preemptively unblock camps because they don't watch my videos and they don't think that far. So just by placing your sentry right away and getting out of there, you're probably going to block that first spawn, and that's the most important one to block typically. If you're starting with an observer, then the same idea applies. You want to rush out and place it as quickly as you can without being spotted. I'd say it's even more important for the observer because if you lose the observer, it gives gold and experience as well as the vision it provided. The sentries are not as painful to lose. So I recommend prioritizing observer placement, and if you don't know where to place them, I have a separate video on that, but think about what lane you need to help with the observer. So in particular, if there are roamers in the game and you're a weak safe lane, they're going to try to kill you a lot, so you want an observer near your lane to protect yourselves. But if you're a strong lane and that roamer is going to go mid or the off lane a lot, you want to place your observer a little further out to spot those rotations and protect your other lanes. As you run into enemy heroes, try to click them and see what they have bought, because it determines how you will play. It might get you some free D wards if you know they have the observers. You see they have 2 sentries, you plan to buy more to fight over the pole camps. If you see someone going for a greedy start, now you know to punish that hero so that they can't get away with it, get like a fast ring of health on an offlaner. You know, you just throw all your spells at them at the very first wave or 2. That's really good to do, and that all starts by clicking the enemy heroes. If you didn't know, you can now click through the top bar. So if you just flash, a hero flashes on your screen, you don't have time to click them, that's okay. Just click through the heroes, whichever one you can see the items of, that's who you saw. So now you know Clockwork is in the area and he went boots first, something like that. It is very common to go for first bloods right now using blood grenades, and if you want to be a real tryhard, bring a smoke of deceit as well. A couple things to think about before you commit to this: consider any heroes with bonus night vision. If they see you before you see them, they're just going to run away. It's going to be a waste of your time. But if you have the bonus night vision, then it helps. Send that person in the front to scout, you find your target. That makes it a lot easier to get kills. Also consider if they're strong early games. If we're a bunch of weak heroes, maybe we're not going for first blood. But if we're a bunch of strong heroes, let's just run at it, throw out all our stuns, our high damage spells, and get a first blood to start us off on the right foot. Do any heroes have escapes? You can still kill them, and sometimes if you force them to start with an escape instead of a different spell, that can be good for the laning stage. But at the same time, I kind of want to kill, so maybe not go to those heroes with the escapes. And then if you're not going to go for a first blood, try not to scatter for all runes. This is such a common mistake, going to like, oh, we should try to get all 4 bounty runes. Don't do that. Just pick 2. Getting 2 bounty runes is fine. Bring enough heroes, and that way, if they try to first blood you there, you have enough heroes to possibly fight back or try to get away. The laning stage is roughly the first 10 minutes, so that will vary depending on your bracket. It's mainly when everyone's still in their lane, just kind of playing that way. And the main thing I want you to think about, or the first thing, is that you want your carry to reach a point where they can farm decently alone. We have to babysit them to start, but eventually we need to go do other things. So what is that point? It's different for every game, but usually you're either winning your lane enough that the carry can be left alone in the lane and they won't die, they're farming there, or the carry can jungle, or it's a combination of both. Try to get in the lane as soon as possible. The very first wave can literally determine the rest of the laning stage. Not always, but it can. So let's get there as quickly as possible and make sure it goes our way. And if you TP because you went for a first blood, that is totally fine, but be a little careful until your teleport is back off cooldown, because if you die, you're gonna have to walk all the way back, and that's gonna feel really bad. I'm gonna break down the laning stage into these 4 topics. You can always get into more detail in a game like Dota 2, but if you understand these 4 things, you'll be in a great spot as a support player. I also want to mention the Lotus Pool, since I didn't know where else to put it. It will spawn every 3 minutes, and when you compare it to the Mangoes and Fairy Fires as a burst heal consumable, it is worth about 175 gold, which, to put that into perspective, is worth more than a full creep wave. So this is free money if you are at the pool to claim it at 3 minutes. First one gets it. If you only remember one thing from this video, I want it to be this: many support players just write off last hits. That's not my job. I'm not a core player. That is not true. You are not a priority for last hits, but last hits are a priority for you. For example, it's usually the support's responsibility to secure the range creep. The range creep stands further back from the creep wave, so it's a little more dangerous for the carry to walk up and get it. If they can get it, then you let them, but if it ever looks iffy, just go ahead and throw an attack at it, throw a spell at it, and try to secure it. It's worth a lot of gold and experience. You don't want this to get denied. This also applies for big neutral creeps. When a pull goes off, they're worth a lot of money, so if you use a spell, you can probably just buy a Clarity or Mango with the money you make. It's totally worth doing. You also want to deny creeps from the enemy. If the lane is empty, you can let the carry handle this on their own. There's a rhythm to it, but when a lot of stuff is happening, you can help out because the carry has to prioritize last hits. So while they're getting a last hit, but you see one of your creeps getting low, you can go for the deny. And finally, you need to get the last hits when your carry can't. And I'm not talking about when they're dead or out of the lane. Of course, we get those, but there will be times your carry is in the lane and we're going to last hit in front of their face, not griefing, legitimate play, high level play. For example, if 2 last hits are coming up and the carry does not have a spell to secure both last hits, they're going to go for one and the other one's just going to die. No, it's not. I'm going to get that last hit. Or the creep is out of range. This happens a lot to melee carries as the creeps move around. If they can't make it in time for the last hit, but you're in range, you should get the last hit. If it's too dangerous to approach, such as with the case with the range creeps, but sometimes melee creeps move around, but you are full health, you are tanky, you go get that last hit. The important thing is to secure gold for your team. And of course, I would like to push that to my carry as much as possible. That's why we have this whole farm priority 1 through 5 thing. But if the carry can't get it, I'm not just going to let the money go into the void. I am poor, I need money, that's my money. Next, let's talk about harassing enemy heroes, which is done incorrectly in many brackets. So I want you to understand that most heroes at the start of the game are about 25 auto attacks from dying from full health. Of course, it depends on your base stats, and of course they're going to be using their regen to, heal up. But if you just keep attacking someone, they will get low and you can kill them. Many people do not attack nearly enough in the laning stage. They just use spells, and they use it incorrectly. Spells should not usually be used just for damage. There are a couple spells that are incredibly efficient, and those can be used just straight up for damage, and if you're full mana, it is okay to throw out a spell that is mostly just for damage, but usually you want to use a spell to help you auto-attack more. Or you have already whittled them down to about 50%, and now we are going to combine our spell damage with whatever extra like stun, slow is part of that spell, along with a couple extra auto attacks to finish the kill. You do not want to harass primarily through spells, you want to harass primarily through auto attacks. In general, if you're a melee hero, you want to look to absorb attention from the enemy and initiate when you want to play aggressive, and if you're a ranged hero, you're looking to harass a lot and follow up when your core goes in or they go in on your core. The reason for this is that melee heroes have innate damage block, 50% to block 16 damage from auto attacks, so when you are being attacked, it's just better than your ranged core being hit. And if you're a ranged hero, by nature of being ranged, you can always harass wherever you're standing. Well, not wherever, but you have more range, whereas the melee hero has to be like point blank to do anything. So you just keep poking for free as much as you can, and when your melee hero finally closes the gap and chooses to fight, you're able to participate right away. Consider how you feel about the 2 versus 2 and then the 1 versus 1, like cores versus each other, supports versus each other, support versus core, core versus support, whatever. All mix and matchups. Figure out what ones you like, go for those. Figure out the one you don't like, avoid those. 2v1 should almost always favor the one with more heroes. If it doesn't, you have severe issues. You got problems there. Level spikes are very important, especially the level 2, because everyone starts with 1 spell. When you go up to 2 spells, that is a 100% increase in the amount of spells you have. So this is the most common time for a lane to be decided, when one team hits level 2 first and they get a kill or 2, and it just snowballs from there. So if you hit level 2 first, look for an aggressive play. If you are the ones behind, be very careful until you also hit level 2 and you're on equal footing again. So you might have to give up a creep or 2 at that time, but it's a lot better than being killed and losing a ton of creeps. In terms of experience distribution, it used to be more popular to push a lot of experience to the carries, but right now that supports are stronger than ever and many powerful supports are popular in the meta, hitting level 2 at the same time, perfectly okay, and I'd say it's actually ideal. Hitting level 3 at the same time, also pretty decent, I would say. It's okay if the carry hits it a little bit sooner. From there, you can push a bit more to the carry, but you don't want to sacrifice too much of the laning presence just to give them XP. Give it to them when it's guaranteed. So like you've done a pull, equilibrium's in a good spot, you've killed the enemy, stuff like that. Let them have it. But if it's ever, oh, I'm going to leave, and that means they're going to lose a couple last hits, that's kind of not worth it right now. Just keep playing with them, splitting XP until an opportunity comes up to allow them to get their own XP. Try to focus the core hero, because that's the one that needs to go for last hits, and they're going to scale up faster with that gold. So if you put a lot of attention on them at the start and make them miss last hits, they're going to be slower to pick up those items. That's going to extend the amount of time that they are weak, and you can kind of bully them out, and maybe your core finishes some items first, and now you have like a more favorable matchup. If nothing else, try to at least focus one hero rather than keep hitting multiple heroes, because it just splits up the damage and it's not as scary. Like having one hero at 50% and one at 100%, that way you can kill the 50% hero and then it's 2v1 versus the 100% hero. But if both heroes are like at 75%, they can both fight back and maybe kill you first, and that's like not so good. Try to avoid drawing creep aggro too much. It will mess up creep equilibrium. There are tricks for this in separate videos. And then if you're using AoE spells, just be a little careful about them. You don't want to push out your lane too much unintentionally, but if you plan to do that and then you're going to do pulls or you're going to hit level power spikes first and then fight with that creep advantage, that is good. But make sure it's a conscious choice and you're not just throwing AoE spells into the creep wave without thinking about it. Now, if you are going to use an AoE spell, try to get the most out of it. Hit multiple heroes, secure creeps at the same time. That is best case scenario. Pulling the lane creeps into the neutral camps is primarily the support's job, but cores should help sometimes. I want you to know that primarily it is a tool for creep equilibrium. Secondary purpose is getting yourself golden experience while denying it from the enemy. The more you understand about creep equilibrium, the easier it is to understand when to pull, because pulling is not always a good thing to do. It can be good or bad. It's a double-edged sword. If you want to know more about pulling, I made a whole separate series on it. It is a bit outdated now, but I would still watch the video on creep equilibrium because that is still accurate, and that will help you understand that, oh, my lane is pushing, this is how soon the lane will come back, so this is the type of pull I should try to do right now. To update you to the current meta though, camps are closer together and closer to the lane than they used to be, so they're easier to contest. It's part of the reason you're seeing a lot more strong supports and strong cores being picked. Along with that reason, that's why supports, hard supports, should consider doing hard pulls more than they used to. Small pulls still have their place, but hard pulls prevent a very classic mistake, which is you go to pull, your carry's left alone, and they die against the two strong enemy heroes. So by doing a hard pull instead, it's not very far from the lane, so you're with your carry the whole time, then it's a short few seconds to the hard camp, few seconds back, and if they go on your carry in that time, you're very close to help. The small camp, although I said it's closer to the lane than it used to be, it's still further away, and that opens up more risk for your carry to die while on their own. If you're happy with creep equilibrium, the enemy is probably not, so make sure you try to stop their pulls to keep the lane in a spot that you want it. And if you ever see camps be stacked up, just be very aware of it, because a single camp, small or hard, cannot kill off a full creep wave on its own without a little bit of wacky stuff going on. Hard camp sometimes can, but a stacked camp, either one, will definitely kill off a full creep wave, and sometimes it'll go really quickly, which means if you don't notice the enemy does a pull for about 5 seconds, the whole creep wave could be gone, and that is a huge blow to you. So when you see a stacked camp, try to stay in that area a lot so you can see pulls happen, you can prevent those pulls, or you can at least be in the area as the creeps die so you can get the XP. Besides playing the lane, there are things to do outside of the lane. This is typically called roaming. Position 5s don't do this as much because carries need to be babysat and we're the babysitters, so we tend to stay with the carry more often than roam, but there are times the carry can be left alone. And I'm not just talking about reaching that point we were talking about earlier, but sometimes you get a kill, sometimes creep equilibrium's in a good spot, and you have about 30 seconds, you could go do something else, and your carry is fine. And sometimes some of these objectives are more important, and carries simply need to know how to play on their own at that time. So a couple of these things could include helping the mid lane. This is a really good one. Mids are the most common players to tilt out. So if you help your mid beat the enemy mid, that guy's going to tilt out. Easy win. Let's go. Some ways you can do this. Help them with the water runes. Help them with the power runes. Power runes especially are nice. This is not just regen from refilling the bottle, but you might get an invis, a haste, double damage, something like that. Something that helps the mid laner get a kill. Could kill their own enemy mid laner, or they might rotate to your lane and help you out. Dota is a team game, so we help the mid laner helps the next person. That's how we all work together. There is bottle refilling. This is great to do anytime you die or are back at the fountain, but not everyone knows to do this. So ask, do you need your bottle refilled? If they don't say anything within 3 seconds, do not do it. It is not worth your time trying to explain what a bottle refill is, but if they do know, it is very good. TP there, fill it, run straight back to your lane. You can try to gank the mid lane often when you're doing one of these things as well, but many hard supports don't have the best toolkit to gank early on in the game, so you don't have to worry about this too much unless the draft works out for it. But you should always be ready to respond to ganks. So try to keep your eye on that mid lane, have your teleport ready. If you see your mid laner in trouble, be ready to teleport over. It's going to make them feel better, you're going to prevent them from tilting out, and if you manage to get a kill, you're going to tilt out the enemy mid laner. It's very good, I'm telling you guys, one of the easiest ways to win a game. Thanks to the twin gate, it's a lot easier to go help in the off lane and then still come back to the safe lane to continue playing this lane as well. In the past, you would have to spend a long time walking all the way up there, or if you TP'd up there, you then had to spend a long walk back and the carry was left alone for quite a while. But the twin gate makes it easy to just hop back and forth between the lanes. So you definitely want to keep an eye on that lane and see if you can ever help it, or be at least aware that someone else might come in through your lane. You got to be ready for those ganks too. Stacking can be a great thing to do as well. Sometimes you can combo it with one of these things as you walk around at the same time. That's fantastic. But anytime you have good wave clear along your course, they can farm multiple creeps at once due to AoE spells, or they're building battle furies, stuff like that. Stacking can be great, especially if you have a hero like Alchemist, Medusa, these kind of like heavy farming cores who are going to hit this critical mass, and then you have a great timing to try to win the game with. Wisdom runes are going to spawn every 7 minutes, and the first one is critical. You must do something at that time. Now, if you can steal it, that's great. Walk over around like 6 minutes, 30 seconds, go to the enemy wisdom rune spawn, try to grab it. If you grab it and die, that's worth it. If you don't get it, but it was like close, that's okay, it was worth the risk. If you know they're a lot stronger than you, they have stuns, you scan it, you already know they're there, then don't go there. Do something else though, because now you know the 4 support is waiting at that wisdom rune, the offlaner is alone. Try to kill the offlaner, try to gank mid, try to gank the other lane. Like, you have to do something at 7 minutes. The wisdom runes are really good. If you manage to steal both, you will have a level advantage in the supports in most cases. If you go 1 for 1, that is fine. Both supports will hit 6 around the 10-minute mark, which is ideal. If you lose both wisdom runes, that is a bad spot to be in. You're going to have to prioritize XP for the next few minutes to make sure you don't fall too far behind. You can go home for regen because obviously you need resources to do any of this stuff, but try not to make a habit of it. It is usually just, wasted time. You're not really doing anything else besides walking home. The more you can stay on the map, the better. You can stack, you can gank, you can do all sorts of stuff when you are actually on the map. To prevent yourself having to go home too often, try to predict when you're going to need more regen and buy it ahead of time. If you get to that point and you don't have it, it's a little too late. So try to understand, like, oh, I'm getting low and I want to do a gank. I'm going to buy a clarity, have it come out now. And that way, as soon as I finish the gank, I can clarity and I'm good to keep playing the map. You want to find that balance between buying enough regen, but not buying too much because we do want to buy our other items. If you can buy move speed before you roam too much, that would be better because as you just walk between these things, you're not getting gold or experience. And so if you roam too much, it's easy to fall behind. But that's why if you have boots or if you do this at night when there's a bonus 30 move speed, then it's a lot easier to save a few seconds going between these objectives. And with those few seconds saved, you can, harass a little more. You can farm a camp here and there, farm a creep, and that helps you keep your XP up. After the laning stage, we enter the early game, which is about 10 to 20 minutes. This is characterized by the carry having a farming item or working on finishing that farming item, and they bought a farming item to farm. So they're going to go for another item or two before they really want to join in on a bunch of fights. That means we want to make space for them by going with the playmakers, who hopefully have finished an item to help with fights, such as a blink dagger for initiation or mech and pipe for aura, so that when we group up, we're all strong. We want to work on building a lead as a team because that makes it easier to play the game. You can all just passively farm, everyone gets gold, but that doesn't really help. So by actually building an advantage by farming and preventing the enemy from farming, that's how you get a net worth advantage and it makes the game easier. So you can do this by getting map control through taking the towers and just holding more of the jungle camps to farm. Like you get 60%, they get 40%. We don't win right away off of that, but if we hold that for a few minutes, we actually build up a lead that way, get more gold, get more experience. That means we have more items, more levels. That makes it easier to take the fights. There might be plays all over the map in the early game because people are still sort of laning and it's breaking down, but also all the tier 1 towers might still be up, which provides very close teleports to wherever a play might happen. So you don't have to respond to every single play with your teleport, but you should try to keep an eye on it and pick the best ones to go to. A couple things you can try to do in the early game. Make sure you hit level 6 ASAP. I'd say 10 minutes is a good benchmark. Up to about 12 minutes, that can be fine as well. The later you are past 12 minutes and you're not level 6, that's bad. So just sit in a lane, go farm creeps, do whatever, get your level 6. Your ultimate is powerful. It will allow you to do things such as with your playmaker. Go with them to different parts of the map, make plays, preferably away from the carry. It can be okay to go with the carry if they have like an ultimate they want to use, like Faceless Void's Chronosphere, he wants to pick up a kill, that's great. And then leave him alone to farm, go somewhere else. Do not draw attention to your carry. Otherwise, your team is splitting gold and XP with him, and other enemy heroes are there like, oh, there's so much action here, I'm gonna come, and then maybe the carry gets killed. We don't want that. Go to the enemy carry, make the enemy team respond to that, ruin their farm while your carry is free. That is a fantastic thing to do in the early game. Warding wise, 1 defensive ward is usually enough for your carry. You don't need to put like 3 there for a guy to play on his own. Just give him 1 in the most dangerous location where you think the enemy is most likely to go through, and then use the rest of your observers to place them on the map where you want to play with the 4 or maybe 3 heroes, that are trying to do things. That's where you need more vision. Try to get the tier 1 towers and gank. It's very generic, I guess, but you don't need to fixate on this either. Do not, oh, I got the tier 1 tower in the safe lane, so now I must get the mid tier 1 tower. Sometimes tier 1 towers are very difficult to take, and you do not need to just sit there trying to siege away at it at 10 minutes. go ahead and just occupy a part of the enemy map, especially if you've already taken one of their towers. Just sit there, because where's that carry going to go? The mid lane is still up, the mid laner's there, the off laner is still in the off lane. Like, he feels weird, he has to jungle, but you're in his jungle, so what is he supposed to do? It's very weird for them. So you're ruining his farm while your carry is hopefully farming, and you're just building a lead that way. You can chip at the tier 2 towers while you do this, just keep farming, and keep in mind that you can always TP back defensively if your carry is in trouble, or maybe your mid laner, if they're not with you, you can TP to them. But teleporting offensively is a lot harder. That's why, as a general rule, you want to walk with your team into the aggressive play and be ready to teleport back for the defensive play. Power runes and wisdom runes are still good to go for at this time. Stacking can be good, but if you're already in the enemy jungle, do not sacrifice a play that you're in the middle of, like, oh, we're sieging this tier 2 tower. Wait, guys, I gotta run all the way back to go stack my ancient camp. That's not really worth doing, but if you happen to be near the ancient camp, then feel free to do it, because your carry is still trying to farm, so they'll still appreciate stacks at this time. If you're ever unclear on how aggressive you need to be, here are 2 guiding questions for you. Do you have your ultimate? If yes, go do something. If no, then just chill and wait. Do you win the late game? If you do, then you can take a slower pace in the game, because we feel good about a long game. But if you're not going to win the late game, then, you know, have a bit more sense of urgency to try to do things, but don't go too fast. That's a very common mistake. I'm sorry, it may not be clear, but just because you're going to lose the late game does not mean you need to win within 20 minutes. You still have a window, probably like 20 to 30 minutes. So you want to build a lead. You want to get to a point where you're strong enough to win early. But if you try to siege a tier 3 tower with no items, you're just going to wipe, and they're going to get gold from that, and they're going to secure their late game. So don't try to go too fast. In the mid game, which is about the 20 to 40 minute mark, you want to more consistently look for bigger team plays and pickoffs. So just follow the cores that you want to play with when you have your cooldowns and your item timings, because we don't want to take fights where we don't have our stuff. But once you have everything, just go with the heroes you want to play with and try to take the fights near the objectives you want. So if we want the enemy tier 2 tower, try to position in that area, have all the heroes there, and if they fight you, you win that fight, you take that tower. If they don't fight you, you take that tower. If they fight you and kill you, you have died on the enemy's half of the map, which means that's sad, we lost, but by the time they run over to your half of the map, you might have respawned at that point, and you can fight over your own objectives. So it is good, if possible, to fight on the enemy's half of the map, but of course there is a defender's advantage, so depending if you're ahead or behind, you may not actually want to fight there. You just make them come back to their own half of the map, and then you fall back to your side where you have a defensive advantage for those fights. If you're the weaker team, look to delay. Even if you're not meant to win in the late game, but I mean, you're not winning in the early game, then you just gotta go late, because Dota gets wild the later it goes, and anybody can win. So start looking to drag the game out, do some ratting, cut waves, whatever you can to just drag the game on. Your warding should be around the areas you want to play. Do not try to play the whole map, but that doesn't mean you can't have observers throughout the map, because seeing different parts of the map allows you to know, like, oh, there's one guy bottom, so we can all be top. It is still good to have a spread of vision, but try to have the majority of your vision in the areas you want to be in. If you want your team to go take Roshan, you need to have observers in that part of the map. You also don't have to place all your observers right away. Some big fights are going to happen at this time, and if you want to hold an observer or a couple sentries and just wait for a fight to break out and then place it on a cliff so that you have the vision advantage during that fight to win that fight, that can also be a good play, so feel free to do that. Try to stay out of sight and focus on your positioning from here on. I mean, that's true throughout the game, but in the early game, if the mid player sees you, they have no items, no levels, they're not really going to kill you. But now we're reaching the point where a lot of heroes can individually kill you, the hard support. You're the weakest hero usually. So you need to be careful. You got to stay out of sight so that you don't just get picked off right away and then have a miserable time. In the mid game, things for you to do include Roshan, Tormentors, tier 2, tier 3 towers. I personally think after the tier 1 towers, as soon as you have the ability and opportunity to take Roshan, you should, and then work on the other objectives. Other players have different opinions, and they may prefer to take tier 2s, tier 3s, stuff like that. You can't force people to do things they don't want to. It's just going to lead the team into chaos, everyone trying to do different things. So if you explain what you want, they won't do it. Just go with what they want. It may not be optimal, but at least you're doing things together, which I think is the best course of action in a public team game. You can push out dangerous lanes for your team as the hard support, because you might just like sit in the side lane and then cut a wave and then run. You don't care that you're just sitting there not doing anything, waiting for the right time, because we're the hard support. We don't need to farm all the time like cores. They're going to go take the safe farm. And if we do get caught, we do get killed, we are the lowest value hero, and we have the shortest death timer, so it's not a huge deal if we die. Especially because you could always buy back if you need to. So supports have the cheapest buyback typically, and so if a fight happens, you get picked off right away because you're a weak support, but you want to participate in the fight, you can buy back, make sure you have your teleport to actually join the fight, and then, you know, go from there. This is a good play. It's not easy to know when to do. So if you're ever unclear on this, I understand if you don't do it, but eventually you might want to experiment with it a little bit to understand it more. I would especially consider saving buyback when Roshan is a viable objective. That way, if there's a Rosh fight, you can buy back and try to get that Roshan, because Aegis really is a big advantage. Stacking is going to become less important at this time because cores are going to have enough items that they can actually just like farm the whole map within 60 minutes. So you don't really have to dedicate a bunch of time sitting there stacking. Again, if it's convenient, if the opportunity is there, go for it. But otherwise, something else is probably a little bit more important than just waiting and making your way over to a camp to stack. Try to avoid teleporting for farm. There are situations for it, so it's tough advice. But typically, if you can walk to farm and save the teleports for fights, that is going to be better. The late game is about 40 minutes onwards, and I would say there's actually also an ultra late game from 60 minutes onwards that is different from the late game, but not many games go there, and I don't want to spend too much time on this video thinking about it, so I'm going to lump it all together here. At this point, any winning fight anywhere on the map can lead to objectives because death timers are really long and cores are really powerful. So the enemy team dives your fountain and feeds, is like, aha, I'm sure we're fine. You can run all the way across the map, instantly killing creep waves. You're blinking, force staffing, extra movement speed from all your items. You make it to their base, you kill their tier 3 tower, they fortify, you wait that out, you kill their barracks. They're still dead because death timers can be like 80 seconds plus at this point, depending on your level. Because of that, everything is about the team fights and pickoffs. Put a lot of focus on this, on finding the right fights for your team, finding the pickoffs so you can then force objectives, and they don't want to fight because they only have 4 heroes, so it wouldn't be a great fight. They could just lose at that point if they lose that fight, so they just have to give up the objective. You want to play around your items and ability cooldowns. You don't want to take bad fights. Try to play around buybacks and Roshan timings. Roshan is very important in the late game. Buybacks, also a win condition now. So earlier I was saying like you can use aggressive buybacks. You can still do that, but just be a little bit more careful about it because they are very important right now. Cores should also have buybacks. If an enemy core hero ever buys back, make them the target of a pickoff. Be ready with your smokes and all of that, because as soon as you pick them off, they don't have buyback. You can just rush it down. Look for those advantageous fights, such as getting a pickoff, but you can also do it by, say, shoving in a lane and just watching the minimap, watching your wards, and if you see one hero split off from the other heroes, you can just go. You can just do it because you see one hero away, 5 versus 4, that is good for us. Let's fight, let's win. Now we run it all the way down to their base and we take it. You still want to stay out of sight and focus on positioning. I don't want to see you hitting tier 3 towers, exposing yourself to being killed by the enemy heroes, right? Stay back, let your cores do their thing, you back them up, and don't be afraid to start thinking about scaling. Now you can think about it earlier as well, but if the game is reaching 40 minutes plus and it doesn't look like it's, you know, going one way or the other yet, anyone who gets a significant amount of gold becomes terrifying, even support players. So especially as your cores start getting slotted out, make sure you're doing a good chunk of farming. Start farming neutral camps, start farming creep waves, because the more gold you get, the more you can contribute to these late game fights. Things to do here, make sure you save buyback. It could be critical to determining the game. Prioritize staying grouped up because team fights at this point can be decided in a matter of seconds, fractions of a second. A blink hex into like double crit from Sven, that hero is gone, and that hero might not have had buyback or something, right? So fights will be very fast. Being all in the top part of the map is not close enough. The second someone gets initiated on, you better be close enough to like force staff them, solar crest, glimmer, right? Not so close you all get caught together in one AoE spell, but close enough that within that fraction of a second, you can respond. Now, of course, playing the map is still important. There will be times to spread apart, but you need to be very map aware at this point. Make sure like we're splitting up because we see them split up. I think they're grouping up. We need to be grouped up to match that. For your warding, you want to prioritize wards that survive because you only need to catch a glimpse of a hero separated from other heroes in order to be able to just like rush it down and take that fight. and wards that are helpful in those fights. So let's say a 5-on-5 does break out, a ward on a cliff could be really helpful to spot the backline, kill them off, win that fight from there. You do not want like very generic wards that are easy to remove, because that's going to make your map dark, and that's going to make it really difficult to move around when you don't know where the enemy heroes are. Speaking of which, if you can make the enemy's map dark, that is fantastic. So if you haven't already bought a Gem of True Sight, you might want to consider one. If you remove all the enemy wards, it'll make it a lot easier for you to find the fights you want to take. Be ready with smokes and teleports as well. Once you see an opportunity, you want to be able to go right away. That opportunity might only be there for a few seconds. So the second it happens, we gotta be ready. Smoke, teleport, run, go get that kill, and now we're good to spend 80 seconds running it down. If you do happen to lose a fight, consider cutting waves, because many teams cannot actually break through back door without the creeps there to remove the back door. So after you lose a fight, many people get too excited, they all group up, they all just rush, so let them go by you, and then you pop back out, cut the wave, and then run away again. If you can cut the next wave, great. Buy your team as much time as possible. This is especially good to do if you still have buyback, but you might need to do it anyways if you have no buyback. And if you do make it to 60 minutes, grab those tier 5s as soon as you can, because tier 5 neutral items are absolutely broken. They are insane. So something you can do here is stack camps in preparation, so that as soon as it hits 60, you can clear out like a full stack of ancients. Hopefully you get a bunch of neutral items. And if you can get your neutral items really quickly, you can force a team fight if the enemy does not have their neutral items. At the least, if everyone has neutral items, you're on even footing. Thank you for watching. I hope you found that helpful. Leave any questions you have in the comments. I'll try to answer them there or make videos to give more details. There's always, more you can do in this game, but I hope this was a great general guide for you so you have a good idea of what to aim for as a support player. Thank you for watching. See you in another video.